Welcome to the Wealthy SAP Consultant Podcast with your host, Anita Anello, where we empower SAP consultants to deliver premium services by showcasing their expertise to the world. In each episode, we dive deep into strategies, tips, and success stories to help SAP consultants like you elevate your consultancy game, attract high-paying clients, and maximize your revenue potential. Get ready to unlock the secrets to success in the SAP consulting world and position yourself as a top-tier consultant. To connect further and explore personalized strategies for your consulting business, schedule a strategy call with our team by clicking the link below. Enjoy the show. Hey, everybody, it's Anita Anello, your host for the Wealthy SAP podcast, and I have a new best friend here with me today, Cher Anderton. Like we always do, we do like this pre-conversation, kind of get to know one another a little bit better. I love how there's so many different ways that we can connect with each other through podcasting. And in that, we kind of share our backstories and strategize about what we're going to talk about. So today we're going to bring some fire conversation around. Actually, it's interesting. You guys know that we talk a lot about conflict resolution in the middle of software projects, businesses, consulting, coaching in our entrepreneur journey. And Cher's really going to bring her expertise as an expert in this space and help us just understand how to take one step forward in this area of being more aware. I'm going to look at my notes around mental health. What's the right word I want to use? Just mental health awareness, emotional intelligence, social interactions with other people, and how we can all do that better in our lives, whether it's our business life, our marriage life, our family life, whatever that looks like. You guys, it's going to be amazing, this conversation today. So Cher, welcome. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for
Yeah,
this conversation. We have a
I
lot of
know.
overlap, so this is gonna be good.
I know, that's awesome. Can you do a little bit of an intro for the audience, like quick little backstory, how you got to where you are today?
Sure thing. My background really is in education. I have a master's degree in social work. Initially wanted to go down this route of being a therapist. We had adopted a kiddo from foster care. Had a difficult time finding a therapist who saw kids, was trauma and adoption informed and all that. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go back to grad school and I'm going to do this thing, and that's what I'll be. And then ended up having a practicum in education, fell in love with that work, and so was a school social worker and school counselor for
Oh,
several years
so
while I
important.
built a therapy
Yeah.
practice in the evening. So
Oh,
put in some really long hours, and after a few years, moved away from working in a building and working directly with kids to working with adults who work
mm,
with kids or take care of kids in some capacity, and just adults, even if you're not in that role, because I was noticing as a school counselor that I was teaching kids, giving these kids this formal education and how to be a good friend and how to be self-aware and take care of their big feelings. And yet we who were teaching the kids never had this formal education. So
yeah.
I'm learning as I'm reading them these books and teaching these lessons, and the adults caring for kids, we were causing some hurt and harm because we
Oh,
weren't
yeah.
doing that amongst ourselves,
Hmm.
having the hard conversations, navigating conflict well, being self-aware, all of that. And
Yeah.
that was therefore impacting kids. And so I really moved into this space of wanting to equip adults with these skills that we were never
Mhm.
taught to be well.
Yeah.
So I really focus on the mental, emotional, and relational wellness. My background in mental health and then in schools and educational systems has really informed me to the point of I'm a therapist now. I wrote a book on this topic on social emotional intelligence. And then education. I love to teach. I love to teach. So workshops, I have an online platform membership where I have online courses that
Yeah.
organizations can access as value adds. And then mediation. I'm a resolutionist,
Hmm.
do some contract work with a company called Empowered, and we just help people have those hard conversations and navigate workplace drama.
Oh,
And so there's a huge through line and connection. I love various kind of things to do. It makes life really interesting, but there's that pathway through of just helping people navigate life much better. There's just a few things we could learn and practice that can make a huge difference in
Yeah.
how we move through our home and work lives. So,
Ooh, I love that. Okay, so let's dive right in and talk around kind of, my sweet spot, my pocket of expertise is around conflict resolution, and specifically those projects. They're big software projects, lots of C-level executives involved. I usually work with the owners or presidents of organizations, and there's a conflict that has arisen in a big SAP project. And then we also serve those independent SAP consultants that serve that same industry. And one of the things that we do is help them. I was sharing with you that I walk them through my system. It's called the de-escalation breakthrough formula that helps those parties that have big 7 to 9 figure businesses and multi-million or billion-dollar projects that are they've gotten to a spot where there's conflict there. And so let's kind of start the conversation there, Cher, around and one of the things that we talked about in kind of like our preamble before we're getting started is, we all hear things a little bit differently. We all have like many of us have these old kind of just just to be transparent about it, we have wounds or um poor thinking. And I don't mean like we're bad thinkers. I mean not, and it's not a good or bad thing. It's that we're just not equipped in this space. And I noticed in my life as I go, the older clients that I work with, like if they're one generation up for me or more than that, then the harder it is for those generations because I can think of lines that my grandparents used to say of like, whoever said you're supposed to be happy, or why do your emotions matter, or
yeah,
or even in-laws where they're like, you can't possibly cry, that means you're a baby, or I don't,
yeah,
all these whack what I look at it with love and say those thoughts are not accurate. They're kind of wacky. So let's talk about conversations, coming to the table to resolve conflict when we have different personality styles, different backgrounds. Like, let's start there. How do you help us walk through those challenges to be able to start to resolve the conflict that exists in our lives?
yeah. It's a big question. So what I like to do is kind of roll it back. So I
Yeah.
look at what we see on the surface is that people are sitting around a table and
Hmm.
there's a conflict that we're going to help them navigate. But underneath that, there's so much more that we're
Oh, yeah.
not. And so what I really like to do is set everybody up for success.
Mhm.
And so roll it back and see have some awareness around what we're bringing to the table, what we're thinking and feeling about it. So the pre-work before you even get to that table
Hmm.
is to me what matters the most. It's
Hmm.
going to foster more of a spirit of collaboration.
I love
If
that.
I can have conversations with each of the people that are coming to the table, just getting to know their story and perspective so that when I'm at that in that space with them and everybody's there and there's high emotions, we've already checked in about how they want to navigate those big emotions that are going to come up. I'm aware
Hmm.
of what their thoughts and stories are that they're telling themselves.
Hmm.
Your point around like not bad thinking or poor thinking, but I call it unhelpful self-talk. It's
Oh,
just we
nice.
have these stories. It's not good or bad because I don't like
Hmm.
people to be sitting in
Hmm.
that binary. It is what it is. It's just
Hmm.
unhelpful when we recognize it. And so how can we shift that?
I love
So
that.
we want to work with people beforehand to say, okay, well, when this comes up, what do you anticipate that other person's going to say and do? Oh, they're going to say and do and this, that, and the other.
Hmm.
Okay, they might. We're going
Hmm.
to let it be new and see if something new shows up. And how are you going to respond to that? If they show up in that predictable way, what are
Okay.
the things that you're going to think, say, and do in order to manage that and be more solutions focused, to make sure that your emotions can be in check, that your thinking is in check, because that feeds our emotions and vice
Hmm.
versa.
Yeah.
And so there's just kind of that space beforehand that I think when that work is done really well,
Hmm.
then the actual conversation goes so much more smoothly
Hmm.
and there can be that connection. But and if not, then there's some skill building that needs to be done, right? Then we roll it
Okay.
back and say, okay, we're going to even go a little bit further back. It's not just about this, pre-conversation that we're having. We need to look at some skills,
Yeah.
some actual
Yeah.
skills, how to shift your thinking, because anybody at any age can change, whether they're 70
Yes.
years old and they've been doing the same business for decades and decades, anybody can shift their thinking. It's
Yeah.
just how open are we to that possibility?
Right. I love that. About how long does the pre-work phase take when you're walking? We'll focus on corporate clients, but
Mhm.
about how long does that pre-work take?
It depends on the size of the group and the conversation we're having, but
Right.
I'm gonna go real slow with it and make sure that we have as many ducks in a row as possible. Again, just because what stays in people's mind is that actual conversation in the moment.
Hmm.
And so I want it to be really successful as
I
much
love
as
that.
possible. And so it could be an hour or two with each participant. And
Okay.
then I'm gonna kind of put together some notes and just make sure that I'm staying on track and seeing some threads and seeing where I can maybe make some connections in the actual conversation. So it can take hours, few hours
Yeah.
minimum.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's similar to the work that I do that I was kind of sharing with you is there's an assessment phase,
Yep.
and being able to interview all of the parties to understand what's being said, what's being felt, what's been done in the past, what's not being said. That's a big thing for me
Yep.
is that you can start to see these threads in this work that we do of like, I wonder if this is also going on, and then asking those good, deep questions. I'm assuming that you do that because you're an expert at what you do. Um, Asking those good, deep questions like, we're not going to stay on the surface. Let's say you were coaching me. Anita, we're not going to stay on the surface. We're going to go a little bit deeper than that. So I love what you're talking about here. So, Cher, then, are you in the room with them while they're going through kind of the negotiation phase? Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Got it.
Yeah. Having
Awesome.
some yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's more focused on kind of interpersonal issues.
Mhm.
It can be around operational change management, which is sounds like your incredible expertise. A lot of it is kind of this lower level, lower stakes where we want to get underneath it before it gets
Mhm.
to that level where you're trying out mediation before you maybe involve legal counsel or that sort of
Yeah.
thing. And so
Yeah.
just kind of trying to put out those low level fires too, because that just builds up over time. Because that's one of our coping strategies, right? For conflict is just to stuff it down
Mhm.
until then it explodes and comes out real sideways.
Yeah.
And we can look back and say, oh man, at this point, at this point, at this point, we could have had a conversation and totally hedged this off.
Yeah.
But we didn't. So hopefully in those conversations too, it's like, okay, what are we going to do differently and better next time?
Mhm.
we're we're on this pathway, or we can anticipate this is going to be a stressful time. We're rolling out this new software. We're, working with all of our clients. We want to give them the best service possible. What are we going to do to set ourselves up for success so we don't end up in the same situation?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we need to change behavior around
Yeah.
it for sure.
Oh, I'm thinking about so many different things to ask you, Cher. One thing is kind of the idea that, you know, how sometimes you go to a room of people. And even when you've just met somebody, sometimes like your connection to the other, I'm going to use language that makes sense to me. If you're listening right now and you use different language that makes sense to you, totally good with that. If my spirit says, I don't really like that person, or I really like that person right off the bat, like
Mhm.
sometimes there's that undercurrent of those things going on. And I know I just finished with a client where the majority of the people in the organization had all been there for like 20 plus years. So
Wow.
there's like years and years
For sure. Yeah.
of a culture around like, oh, okay, you guys don't really get along very well. Um, so have you experienced that? Like, how do you unravel when it's a lot of years of pent up frustration or just misunderstanding? Like, let's talk about that a little bit.
So in situations like that, when an organization really has a pretty set culture and maybe not the healthiest in some ways,
Mhm.
especially around having hard conversations, we all have our stories around
Yeah,
why, people say like, I avoid conflict, I hate conflict.
yeah,
And that's all based off of what we observed as kids growing up, right?
yeah.
We're either
Hmm.
doing the same exact thing or we're trying to do the opposite. But what have found in my work is that people will swing the pendulum so far to the other side. We never talked about anything. I'm going to talk about every little thing that's
Right.
ticking me off.
Yeah,
And that's also not okay. So we want to
yeah.
kind of find that happy medium. But what I like to do is I like to go in a little bit soft and whole organization.
Nice.
So I'm going to have some conversations absolutely with leaders. They need to be on board. They also need to be doing the work in order, because in that position, in that hierarchy, they are they're the leader, and the people that are there are working with them are looking to them as
Hmm.
model.
Yeah.
So we need to be modeling and teaching as leaders.
Yes.
And so definitely some work one-on-one with leaders to make sure they're on board, we're on the same page.
Hmm.
And then we just come into the whole organization and start at the bottom with some foundational skills. Everything I teach, no matter whether you're your own self-help guru or you've never opened a book or,
Hmm.
leaned into developing your self-awareness up to that point, everyone's going to walk away with something
I love
from
that.
a workshop or training. And it just kind of gets people alive about this work. I have this kind of way of making it very relatable and sometimes funny. This work doesn't have to be heavy and hard.
Yeah.
And I really just like to draw people in and get buy-in into the work. And
Yeah.
then that foothold is in, it's easy to say, oh, this team over here really needs this piece added.
Mm.
This team over here needs this extra piece. And so it's kind of like coming from the, I don't like to say the top and the bottom, or I mentioned the word hierarchy before, but I do think there's just a lot of dynamics at play there that I'd like to come at it from lots of different angles
Yes.
so that it's really connecting with all of those access points that we can have in an organization, because there are so many.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's usually where we begin with that kind of work, because I want to see where they're at. How self-aware and self-regulated are you
Hmm.
to get to the point where we can sit around a table and be solutions focused together and really be as a team facing the issue versus facing off.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Another question for you, Cher. A lot of times, while I don't ever go into a project assuming I know how I'm going to solve it, I do know that there are absolutely threads in my business of these kinds of challenges that I am an expert at solving. So there's always kind of these similar themes that I find in my work. Maybe one person is a saboteur, one business process needs to go and be updated and refined. Um, Maybe one business partner that they have for an add-on solution is really not the right fit for them, and we need to rethink that strategy altogether. Maybe one's groups, like two groups of people, kind of traditionally have um, some conflict because of the way they're organized in the organization. So, do you see some of those similarities in your work where there's kind of almost like these buckets of similar threads? I'm not saying every person is the
Yeah.
same or every project is the same. Nor do we want to go in and say, I know how to solve your problem before I even hear that. Like that is not helpful at all. But do you
Yeah.
notice that there's some similarities in the work that you do that allow you as an expert in your space to be able to say, once I go through my pre-work, then I know that I can like pull this tool out of my tool belt, and then I'm going to pull this tool out of my tool belt, and then we're using the similar kind of tools in the work that we do. Is that is that an accurate statement, or do you find something different?
No, absolutely accurate. And I use maybe a little bit of different language, and that's kind of where my mental health background comes in. Um, but from my perspective, we all have these internal systems, right?
Yes.
Parts of ourselves that have different roles, carry different stories, different wounds, to your point earlier,
Yeah.
show up in high stakes situations or in
Mm.
conflict. That's when they're activated. And so
Yeah.
what I do notice definitely are there are threads in the
Hmm.
parts of people that can show up that I recognize, because
Hmm.
a lot of us have very similar parts, right? And so um it's easy to kind of recognize and say, okay, I've seen this, but how this plays out, I think a beautiful part of this work is that there's not one set way, but
Yeah.
there are some fundamentals, sure, that
Yeah.
certain parts show up, and that maybe it'll go a certain way, but you're open to the possibility. And I think that's again, the creativity and the wonder
Yeah.
of this is like, I wonder where we're going to get today. It's going to be good. That's what
Right.
I always believe in. Even
Hmm.
when things are really wild and hard, it's just, I really do believe in humanity to figure it out.
Yeah.
So I like to bring that energy to spaces because we need more of that in the world today for
Oh,
sure.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, just really leaning into where are we gonna come together,
Mm,
figure
I
this
love
out.
that.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful, Cher. What it makes me think of is I just reconnected with an old colleague of mine in the SAP world, and we've known each other for, I don't know, like 22 years. And just describing to him kind of an updated version of what I'm doing these days. And I haven't talked to him in, I don't know, probably 15 years or something like that. And he said, he's very like cut and dry kind of guy, described it. And he goes, "Oh, so you're a fixer, Anita." And oftentimes when I describe that, and I'm wondering if this happens to you too, oftentimes when you describe work that we're doing around conflict management, mental health, resolution, emotional intelligence, like social intelligence, those kinds of work, sometimes others can look at us and be like, "Why would you want to do that work?" And I'm like, "Oh, I love it because it's so every single person is different. Every single day is different. It's like an adventure. My heart is also to be able to help and serve people in the
Yeah.
time when they're at their lowest. It's actually one of the things that I loved. It was done for me in my life growing up in some really difficult situations. And I love being able to help people like pull themselves out of that muck and that mire and being able to set them back on that path so that they can go forward and do the things, what I would say that God's called each of us to do, and they can fulfill that destiny and that purpose and that passion that they already have in them. Because nobody's desire is to stay in constant conflict or woundedness or struggle. Not like nobody on the planet
Yeah, but they
wants to
can't
do
see a
that.
way out.
Hmm.
That's the
Yeah.
piece. It's one of the reasons why I call my platform Where to Begin, because
Oh,
we are just like I don't even know where to start to build social
I
emotional
love that.
intelligence, which is just essentially those tools and strategies and skills we need to be well,
Yeah.
to be good humans, or humankind, as I like to say.
Hmm.
And so yeah, my hobby is people. And
Yeah.
as an introvert and a neurodivergent introvert, that's a different thing, but I manage it really well. I have really lovely boundaries around the work that I do because I do specialize in trauma in my
Yeah.
therapy practice. And so um, I do, I have seen people and sat with people in these spaces
Hmm.
where maybe they've never said anything out loud or never
Hmm.
told anybody something before. And then we build from there.
Yeah.
And it's the greatest work in the world for me. And I just love people discovering more beautiful things about themselves in these
Hmm.
processes, because I have this kind of phrase of owning discomfort so it doesn't own you, that when we lean into
Oh.
that discomfort and we don't give into the power of like, oh, that's a challenge, I feel really uncomfortable, that means it's a
Hmm.
bad, wrong thing. There are a lot of things in life that are incredibly beautiful and essential, and I wouldn't trade it for the world, like being a parent.
Hmm.
Is that a comfortable role all the time? I would say not. I would say absolutely not. And so I really love people discovering these neat things about themselves. Like, I didn't know I could do that.
Yeah.
Here I go. And then you get the energy from that, and then they just keep building on it. And so
Mm.
I really do think in these processes of navigating conflict, and that people discover neat things about themselves that they
Oh,
can
yeah.
then see others in different and better ways.
Mm.
But we really do need to embrace conflict. In my book, I talk about it as one of the most underutilized
Mm.
tools to have healthy relationships.
Yeah.
We just need to do it well.
Yeah.
We need to navigate it respectfully, kindly,
Yeah.
regulated way as much as possible.
Yeah.
But it's really valuable. And when we can see it that way, then the whole world opens up, because man, all these things that we've avoided or
Mm.
waited till they got so bad and
Mm.
calling in people like you and I, um, could be avoided
Yeah.
if they just practice different skills and that sort of thing.
Right. I think also the beautiful part is when I lean in to work through the hard things in life, then even though it is hard, like parts of
Mm.
life are really hard, but that it helps me to grow. It helps me to mature. It helps me to come out a different person and be transformed through the process. And, we all have things in our lives that we maybe wouldn't have raised our hand early on and said, yes, let me go through that medical crisis. Yes, let me go through that conflict. Yes, let me go through that abuse. Let me go through that difficult season of my life. And yet, when you're able to have, no matter how small or how big, when you're able to come out on the other side and create a different evidence file in your brain of like, oh, I can do that. I can do hard things. Right? You're right. Is that it's like the whole world starts, the more that you do that, that's like your whole world starts to open up and you're like, oh, wait a minute. If I can do this little bit over here, then I can do a little bit more over here. And you kind of, it's like a muscle. It's like flexing a muscle and working on our muscles. If we want to be fit for our whole lives, we have to do some exercise. We can't
Yeah.
just sit on the couch and reach and eat bonbons. Like our mind and our emotions are the same way. We need to flex those, practice those. And most people, um, not most people were not given these skills when they were growing up, right? It was right. My husband and I
What
have
we
this, right? In my household, everything with my parents was like swept under the carpet and as if there were no problems. And yet I would hear my parents fighting behind closed doors. In my husband's household, everything was loud and obnoxious and everybody was always yelling at each other. And so, as we've blended those old familial things and recognize, yeah, we don't want to do either of those extremes in our household with our marriage and our kids. It's really helped us to create new healthy boundaries, walk through more emotional intelligence, parent differently, have a different marriage than either of our parents. You know what I mean? Like, I love that. I love how the work that you're doing in the corporate space, this is what's so exciting. The work that
Yes.
you're doing in corporate space actually helps C-level executives and above and organizations have better relationships everywhere. Do you get that feedback?
Yes, that is the goal, actually, that I teach the skills that can help them in their personal and professional lives.
Yeah.
And so, especially I was working with very taxed, burned out educators during COVID, doing online teaching. They're
Oh,
teaching from home. They've got their own kids and own lives that they're managing.
yeah.
And, we're talking about how to care for themselves at work, which also then just therefore translates in other contexts. That's the goal. So I love that I can help people at work and at home.
Hmm.
That that feels like a gift for sure.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting that somehow when we learn things, like if you work at a corporate job, I know when I was in the corporate space, I sometimes could think this. I'm pretty task oriented in my personality style. I'm very, very direct and kind of see things real black and white. And so in my mind, I'd be like, well, I just learned this skill over here at work. Therefore, I can be successful in this area and work. And yet I remember distinctly kind of like, oh, I could use that skill at home too. Wouldn't that be great? I wonder why sometimes, maybe you have some insight into this, Sharon. It's okay if you don't, but I'm just wondering why sometimes our brains tell us just because I'm learning a good, new, empowering skill in the workforce, why would I assume that it's not going to benefit me in all other areas of life? Do you have, like, with your background, do you have any insight in that?
Yeah, it's just some neuroscience around that our brain makes certain connections in certain contexts. And
Mm,
so it has a really hard time what we call generalizing the skills. So
okay.
with kiddos, hey, they could do this behavior, this positive behavior that we wanted them to have in the lunchroom,
Mhm.
yet they go out to recess and then all of that goes out the window and you're wondering what just happened. And what you can see at a very just simple kind of fundamental level with kids is that they could do it in that one space. They learned it, and
Yeah.
we have to slowly teach the brain. Oh no, that thing that you did to take deep breaths when your friend wouldn't let you sit next to him in the lunchroom, which is why you
Yeah.
get so activated and throw your lunch tray all over the place and all of that, that you can actually do that out on the playground too. So let's practice it there. So it's a
Yeah.
matter of just being very conscious and intentional about saying that thing, where else can I use it in my life?
Mm,
Where else can
I
I
love
take?
that.
And a lot of us have those kind of contexts where we're really successful,
Hmm.
just thriving, we got it down. And then others that are very much less so. So we want to sit down and be pretty self-reflective and say, what are my strengths here and how can I translate them or transfer them to different spaces. And it's really just giving your brain the new instructions because your brain wants comfort.
Mhm.
It wants to be quote unquote right. So whatever
Mm,
instructions you give it, it's going to find all the evidence to match up and reinforce those instructions and make it
yep.
happen.
Hmm.
So that's what we want to be very careful about the instructions that we're giving. Back to the earlier point around unhelpful self-talk.
Yeah.
We want to be really clear about the instructions we're giving our brains of how we want to move through the world, how we want to show up, the skills we want to be practicing. And when we do that, then we get the brain on board with the work.
Mm,
Otherwise, the brain's going to keep putting up roadblock after roadblock.
yeah.
Which any of us who've tried New Year's resolutions, we're in January right now, the last day of January. We all survived the 5 million weeks of January. And some of us might have like made some resolutions. Oh, this is the year I'm going to do the things.
Yeah.
And they're petering out by now. We want to get clear on like what are the instructions we've given our brain? Have we said, hey, we're doing this new and different thing, and we're going to take it easy and slow. So instead of going from the couch to 5 days a week at the gym for an hour, we're going to go from the couch to 2 days a week for 5 to 10 minutes. And then
Mm,
we're just going to go home and we're going to say, hey, brain, wait, we did a really good job. Nice job
yeah.
on that. And
Yeah.
just bring it along because then you're going to get all of the systems on board that are needed to be on board for you to experience those goals, achieve those goals, experience just differences in your mental and emotional and relational wellness. Relationships are really where we see how our mental and emotional wellness plays out. Like
Mm,
if well, our relationships are typically pretty well,
yeah.
mentally, emotionally well. If we're not in either of those categories, spiritually, I would add that in too
Hmm.
as one of the categories, that our relationships are going to suffer. And so
Yeah.
if we humans in our life that we really care about at work, at home,
Mhm.
then it behooves us. It's really important for us to do our very best to learn these skills to show up in the best possible way so that we can all thrive and make communities better. Because we as individuals make up systems and communities, right? We make up
Mhm.
organizations, every
Mhm.
human. So when we're well, the organization can be well.
Yeah. Oh, man, this is amazing. I could go on with you forever.
I
This is
think
so
we
awesome.
could. We could go on for a long time. And I loved earlier also I have my ear perked for this
Yeah.
work because I'm constantly what I call gently pushing back with my clients around it. But you used the word and earlier.
Mm,
This is really hard and
okay.
yet da, 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 da. And I just want to point out it's such a beautiful word for all of us to use more and more in our vocabularies. This is really hard for me right now to make these changes, and I'm going
Yeah.
to keep putting one foot in front of the other. I'm going to
Yeah.
keep giving it a go. I'll ask for help when I need it, yada, yada, yada. Yeah.
Oh,
So I like
that's
that.
good. That's good. Okay, maybe one last thing. Cher, you talked about you can correct me if I get this wrong, but what I understood you say is you're trying new things, trying to improve our I'm going to make sure I get your words right. It's the social and emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
Um, and in that take giving ourselves time, and then you kind of talked about some baby steps. Can you elaborate that on a little bit? Because yes, we are at the beginning of the year. Yes, we
Mhm.
serve an audience that's really high powered people that are going and moving and shaking and doing some great things this year and
Yeah.
probably have some big goals laid out for themselves and their organizations. My mind traditionally does not work that way. I'm kind of a all in, kind of intense, a
Yeah.
little bit more introverted. Like I want to get the things done. So maybe kind of give the audience and me like some a little bit deeper version of how do we what I'm hearing you say is if you were going to talk to me, Anita, yes, you got these great goals and then but like love yourself along the way, give yourself grace along the way. I'm just transparently, I'm not really amazing at that. Because like I said, like I will dive in head first and you know, work myself to the point of getting the things done, work really like I was raised in an environment that hard work was really the thing to do. So can you help us in that regard?
Well, I think we definitely have some similar parts around that piece. I'm also just an Aries. I'm a type A hustler. I love to do things. I have a ton of energy. And so I have also been on that pathway where I've called myself a bull in a china shop, where I will just kind of, if I put my mind to something, I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to achieve the goals. But I haven't always been well physically.
Hmm.
I've had phases where I've had autoimmune disease
Oh, yeah.
diagnoses, and I haven't been as mentally and emotionally well,
Hmm.
and all kinds of things. And so what I've learned is that I can accomplish just as much, even more, and it's sustainable when I move through things in ways that I can only describe as a bit softer and gentler.
Okay.
You said grace and compassion, but I just kind of embracing the kind of softer side of life and a bit more ease with it, we can actually accomplish more loving ourselves forward than most of us do, where we just kind of berate ourselves to get the things done. Oh, come on, get up, you're
Yeah.
lazy, get that thing done. And we're not being kind to ourselves along the way.
Mm.
So if we're not being kind to ourselves, it's no wonder that we're having a hard time in relationship, because we can't give what we don't got. If I'm
Mhm.
not kind to myself, and I'm just like, get all these things done, I'm going to be dragging people along who don't move through the world that way. And so it's just a greater understanding of like all the different parts of me that can show up in the space, and which ones do I want to pour more energy towards, which parts do I want to feed, so to speak. And so I really do like to, the baby steps are having a greater understanding of what we bring to the table. Even
Mm.
me, as someone who goes into organizations or is sitting across the space from somebody in my therapist role, I need to know what I'm bringing to the table in that moment and then all together. And so I think the most important place to begin to live really to our truest full potential
Mhm.
is to get to know ourselves and that beautiful space in our internal world so well that we can notice, oh, that part's showing up that
Mm.
says that I'm going to be a failure, and so I shouldn't even give it a try. And
Mm.
I can just have a little conversation and then move forward and just really, again, then also understand, hey, what's Anita bringing to the table in this
Yeah.
conversation? What parts of her do I see show up, and how are we connecting? And it just helps us move through the world, and it's just a better way to move through
Mm.
the world. It's more relational. We
Yeah.
can have a lot more joy, connection, and
Mm.
ultimately success,
Yeah.
because people genuinely feel our wellness,
Yeah.
and energy bleeds out everywhere. It
Yeah.
impacts everybody positively versus, oh, Cher's just coming in and she's going to do the things. And yeah, she can accomplish a lot, but I can't do that because that's
Yeah.
not how I do things. It's just making space for everybody and how
Mhm.
we all move through and want to achieve the same goal. So
Yeah.
we can go about it in different ways, but the more we know about ourselves, the better we can navigate it amongst other people as well. So
That's
that's
so
my
good.
take.
Yeah, so good, Cher. Oh my gosh, I'd love having you here today. It's been so amazing. Hey, Cher, as we're wrapping up our conversations, first of all, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the work that you're doing in your space, the way that you're showing up for all of your clients and all the different ways that you have organizations that are built around you. I love that. And I just want to honor you and the way, just where you are in your journey and the way that you're helping people to take that next step forward in all the work that you're doing. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it.
Of course, happy to do it. And the same back to you. It's so lovely. That's one of my favorite things about connecting with people on podcasts, is just I
Yeah.
get to meet these incredible humans doing really great work. And we just need more of this
Yeah.
happening around the world. So I love that you can spotlight people who are doing that, and people get to know you better too. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, you bet. You bet. And Cher, just one last thing. Would if somebody wants to get in touch with you further, how can they do that?
The best place is through my website. There's all the little buttons to click. You can find any products or services that you might be interested in that space. And so it's just Cher Anderton, and that's with the TON.com. Yeah, so it's a little bit different, not misspelling my last name, but SherAnderton.com, and connect with me there. Send me a note. I'm on social for work only, but I don't have the apps on my phone. I actually have someone helping me navigate that because delegation, and I don't love social media. So I may miss it there, but an email or connecting with me through my website is great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank
And we'll
you.
make sure you guys know, we'll always make sure and put Cher's info in the show notes. So, Cher, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you so much. And for everybody listening, God, be well in what you're doing and what you're called to do. And if you want to reach out to Cher for some more information or reach out to myself, you guys know how to contact me. We'll make sure and put those links in the show notes. So, thank you. And we'll see you all on the next episode of our show. Take care.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode of the Wealthy SAP Consultant Podcast with your host, Anita Anello. We hope you gained valuable insights and strategies to take your consulting business to new heights. Remember, by showcasing your expertise and delivering premium services, you can attract high-paying clients and increase your revenues while serving your customers at the highest levels. To dive deeper into implementing these strategies and overcoming challenges in your consulting journey, schedule a strategy call with our team by clicking on the link below. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll continue to provide you with actionable tips and advice to excel in the SAP consulting industry. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, keep shining in your consulting business.